The air was thick with the scent of rain and earth as the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon. From his vantage point atop the ridge, Sir Cael Thorn watched the thorn groves below, their twisted branches casting long, tangled shadows across the ground. The groves, once sanctuaries of ancient power, now bristled with an uneasy energy, as if the land itself sensed the storm gathering in the kingdom's heart. Before him, the scattered banners of his allies fluttered weakly in the morning breeze. Knights, soldiers and loyalists had gathered, a motley force bound not just by oaths, but by the shared desperation to face the coming darkness. Caelan's eyes, sharp despite the wariness etched into his weathered face, scanned the horizon where the first stirrings of Marik's forces would soon appear. The kingdom was fracturing. Lords and ladies whispered behind closed doors, their loyalties torn between tradition and ambition. The thorn binding that once symbolized honor and unity had become a weapon in a deadly game of power. Lord Marik Vane, adorned in his blackened thorn armor, moved through the court like a shadow, his cold eyes reflecting a ruthless ambition that chilled even the most steadfast hearts. In the grand hall of the capital, Marik's voice rang clear and commanding. Surrounded by his most loyal knights, he spoke of control, order, and the necessity of crushing all who opposed him. The courtiers listened, their faces masks of politeness that barely concealed the fear and uncertainty simmering beneath. Back in the camp, the flicker of a campfire cast dancing shadows on the faces of two men seated close. Sir Joran, broad-shouldered and ever the brash companion, met Caelan's gaze with a grin that carried both challenge and hope. "You worry too much, old friend," Joran said, tossing a small stick into the flames. "The thorn trees bloom for those who dare. We're not done yet." Caelan's lips twitched in a faint smile, but the weight of his failures lingered heavy in his heart. "This fight, it's more than blades and armor," he murmured, voice low and measured. "It's the soul of the kingdom at stake." Joran's grin faded into a serious nod. "Then we fight not just for honor, but for the future we want to see." Elsewhere, beneath a canopy of blooming thorns, Elysia moved with practiced grace. Her slender fingers tended to the marks left by Caelan's bond with the Brambleheart, the delicate wounds pulsing with a strange vitality. The sharp scent of the thorns mingled with the earthy aroma of herbs she carried, creating an atmosphere both soothing and somber. "The bond deepens," she said softly, her emerald eyes meeting Caelan's. "Strength comes at a cost. Are you prepared to pay it?" Caelan nodded, the solemn determination in his eyes reflecting the gravity of the path he had chosen. "I do not fear the cost, only the failure to fulfill my oath." As the day wore on, the kingdom braced itself, word spread like wildfire. Allies took up arms, and the nobles' factions sharpened their daggers, both literal and figurative. The delicate balance of power teetered on the edge of chaos. The thorn trees, ancient witnesses to centuries of blood and honor, stood silent sentinel. Their blooming thorns, vibrant and dangerous, mirrored the tension that coiled tight in the hearts of those who would soon clash beneath their watchful branches. Caelan's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, the leather-worn but steady. He took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the Brambleheart's curse within him, a searing pain mixed with a strange vitality. The storm was here. The battle for the kingdom's soul was about to begin. He turned to his companions, Joran's steady presence, Alicia's quiet strength, Lady Myron's poised resolve, and found in them the fragile hope he clung to. Together, they would face whatever darkness Lord Marik unleashed. The gathering storm was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and the kingdom's fate would be decided in its fury. As the sun dipped low, casting the thorn groves into a crimson glow, Caelan whispered a vow to the winds. "For honor, for the kingdom, for the oath that binds us all." And with that, the first clash of steel echoed across the land, heralding the beginning of a battle that would change everything. The room was thick with the scent of old parchment and candle smoke. Sir Cael Thorn sat hunched over a cluttered oak table, his scarred fingers tracing the faded ink on ancient scrolls. Beside him, Alicia's emerald eyes flickered with a mixture of apprehension and urgency. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The council records, the orders sent before the mission, the handwriting, the seals, they all point to Marek. Caelan's jaw tightened. The years of self-blame and gnawing guilt suddenly ignited into a fierce flame of betrayal. "He used us," he said quietly, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "He sent us into the jaws of death, not to protect the kingdom, but to remove me as a threat." Alicia nodded, her expression solemn. "And his reach extends far beyond the battlefield. The thorn-binding tradition, the very heart of our order, is a tool in his grasp for the throne." A sudden knock at the chamber door made them both start. The door creaked open, revealing Lady Myron, cloaked in shadow, but her eyes alight with determination. She stepped forward, extending a sealed letter toward Caelan. "This came from an informant within the palace," she said softly. "Proof of Marek's manipulations and of the court's complicity." Caelan took the letter, feeling the weight of fragile hope in his hands. He broke the seal carefully, unfolding the pages as the scent of blooming thorn bushes from the garden wafted through the cracked window. Each word confirmed the dark web of deceit spun by Marek. The kingdom's corruption ran deeper than any had dared imagine. Later that evening, in the dim warmth of a tavern, Caelan met with Sir Joran. The flicker of the hearth cast long shadows across their faces as a storm of emotions raged between them. "You should have trusted me," Joran said, his voice rough but earnest. "We were brothers in arms, Caelan. You shut me out when you needed me most." Caelan's eyes burned with pain. "I thought you blamed me for the deaths, for the failure. I couldn't bear it. I never blamed you," Joran replied, stepping closer. "But now, with this truth, we have a chance to fight back. Together." The words broke through Caelan's defenses, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself a flicker of trust. As midnight deepened, Caelan found himself standing alone atop the jagged cliff that overlooked the kingdom. The cold wind whipped through his dark hair, carrying the sharp scent of thorn blossoms. Below, the lights of the capital twinkled like distant stars, fragile yet persistent. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him, but so did a new fire, the fire of purpose. He clenched his fists, feeling the subtle pulse of the Brambleheart's bond beneath his skin, a painful reminder of the sacrifices to come. "This ends now," he vowed to the night, "for my honor, for the kingdom, for all who have suffered under Marek's shadow." The thorn trees around him seemed to shudder with approval, their blooming thorns a solemn testament to the oath he would yet keep. The battle ahead would be fierce, the cost high. But Caelan Thorn was no longer the broken knight of the past. He was a force reborn, willing to face the darkness, to sacrifice, and to bloom anew. The kingdom awaited its reckoning, and so did fate. The oppressive silence of the Thorn Grove was shattered by Caelan's ragged breaths, each inhalation laced with the bitter sting of pain that radiated from the crown of thorns embedded deep within his flesh. The Brambleheart's branches, dark and gnarled, twisted around him like living chains, their thorns blooming with a haunting crimson glow that pulsed in rhythm with his faltering heartbeat. Sweat mingled with blood as Caelan staggered forward, every step a torment that threatened to unravel the very fabric of his soul. His vision blurred, fragmented by ghostly apparitions, knights long dead, their faces etched with agony and regret. They whispered warnings and laments, their voices a chilling symphony that echoed within the cavern of his mind. "You cannot endure," one murmured, spectral fingers reaching toward him through the veil of pain. "The curse will claim you as it claimed us." But Caelan's grip on consciousness was ironclad, forged from years of hardship and a desperate need for redemption. He forced himself to focus on the faint warmth beneath his fingertips, the subtle pulse of life that tethered him to the Brambleheart. The thorn tree was no mere plant. It was a living, breathing entity, ancient and sentient, and it demanded sacrifice in exchange for power. A sudden wave of agony crashed through him, causing him to collapse to his knees amidst the tangled roots and blooming thorns. His hands trembled as he gripped a nearby branch, the thorns piercing his skin anew. He could feel the venom coursing through his veins, a poison that sought to consume his essence and bind him forever to the tree's fatal embrace. "Caelan!" A voice broke through the haze, sharp and urgent. Elijah knelt beside him, her hands glowing faintly with a soft green light, the scent of crushed herbs filling the air. "Hold on. Breathe. You must not let the curse claim you now." She pressed her palms to his chest, murmuring ancient incantations, taught only to the keepers of thorn-binding lore. The warmth from her touch seeped into his skin, a fragile shield against the creeping darkness. Caelan's eyes fluttered open, meeting hers steady, resolute, and full of unwavering faith. "I won't fail," he rasped, voice cracked but fierce. "Not this time." From the shadows, Sir Joran stood sentinel, his broad shoulders squared as he brandished his sword. The faint rustling of leaves betrayed the approach of Lord Maric's loyalists, their dark silhouettes slipping through the gloom like predators circling a wounded prey. Joran's gaze was sharp, unwavering, as he prepared to defend his friend with every breath. "They come," Joran growled, positioning himself between Caelan and the encroaching threat. "We hold this ground, no matter the cost." The first clash of steel rang through the thorn grove, sparks flying as blades met in a deadly dance. Caelan, still weak but unwilling to yield, drew upon the burgeoning power coursing through his veins, the gift and curse of the bramble heart. His wounds stung with renewed ferocity, but his spirit burned brighter, fueled by a fierce determination to survive and protect. Visions assaulted him once more, but this time they were different. Instead of whispers of despair, he glimpsed flashes of hope, knights who had overcome their trials, the kingdom's thorn trees blooming in radiant splendor, and his own face, resolute and unbroken despite the scars that marked him. The blooming thorns around him glowed a vivid red, throbbing in tandem with his heartbeat. They were a symbol of the painful transformation underway, a merging of flesh and spirit, sacrifice and strength. Caelan felt the thorn's pulse synchronize with his own, a grim yet vital connection that bound him irrevocably to the fate of the kingdom. A surge of energy propelled him to his feet, his sword slicing through the air with renewed vigor. He fought not just for survival, but for the oath he had sworn, the promise to protect, to endure, and to rise beyond the bitterness of his past. With every strike, the curse's grip threatened to tighten, but with every breath, Caelan wrestled it back, forging a fragile harmony between man and thorn. As the battle raged, the grove itself seemed to respond. The once menacing thorns shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows that danced across the faces of combatants. The air was thick with the scent of earth and blood, mingling with the distant hum of ancient magic awakening. When the last of Lord Maric's forces fled into the darkness, the grove fell silent once more. Caelan collapsed against the Brambleheart's trunk, exhaustion and pain threatening to overwhelm him. Yet beneath the torment, a new strength blossomed, a resilient spark that promised survival and the fortitude to face the trials yet to come. Elijah and Sir Joran stood by his side, their faces etched with relief and unspoken respect. In that moment, Caelan understood the true cost of his bond, not just the physical agony or the ever-present shadow of death, but the profound transformation of his very soul. The thorn's fury had tested him to the brink, but it had not claimed him. Instead, it had forged him anew, a thorn-bound knight, scarred but unbroken, ready to face the darkness looming over the kingdom. And as the first light of dawn broke through the twisted branches, the blooming thorns glowed softly, a solemn promise of sacrifice, hope, and the battles yet to be won. The chapter closes with Caelan's heavy breaths mingling with the rustle of the thorn leaves. The promise of renewal hanging in the air like the fragile bloom of the cursed tree itself. The night of torment has passed, but the war for the kingdom's soul is far from over. The camp was alive with a restless energy that seemed to pulse beneath the surface, like the heartbeat of a great beast ready to spring. Fires flickered in scattered rings, their flames throwing erratic light against the rough-hewn wooden tables strewn with maps and hastily sketched battle plans. Sir Cael Thorn stood at the center, his lean frame casting a long shadow beneath the worn canopy that sheltered their war room. His scarred cheek twitched slightly as he traced the lines that marked the enemy's approach, eyes sharp despite the weight of exhaustion pressing upon his shoulders. Around him gathered the trusted few who had pledged their lives to his cause, each carrying their own burdens but united by a shared purpose. Sir Joran, broad-shouldered and ever restless, leaned over the table, his cropped dark hair catching the firelight as he pointed toward the narrow pass where Marik's forces would likely funnel their assault. His perpetual grin was absent tonight, replaced by a quiet intensity that spoke of the storm gathering in his soul. Elijah stood slightly apart, her slender figure wrapped in a cloak of deep green that seemed to blend with the shadows. Her long auburn hair fell like a cascade of fire, eyes bright as emerald leaves as she listened intently. Though her hands were marked with the stains of herbs and tinctures, the strength in her voice was unwavering when she spoke of the rituals that bound Caelan to the Brambler Heart and the sacrifices yet to come. Lady Myron, ever graceful and poised, shifted her weight from one foot to the other, fingers lightly brushing the intricate embroidery on her sleeve. Her keen eyes scanned the maps with a measured gaze, reflecting the political acumen that had earned her a place among the nobility and the courage to stand beside a disgraced knight. "The court is fracturing," she said softly, "but there are those who see the truth in Caelan's cause. We must hold fast to those alliances." Caelan nodded, the weight of leadership settling firmly on his shoulders. The time for hesitation has passed. Marik will not wait. We must be ready to stand or fall together. Outside, the camp was alive with the sounds of preparation. The clash of steel rang as Sir Joran led a group of knights through rigorous training drills beneath the twisted branches of the thorn trees. Each swing of his blade was a testament to his fierce loyalty and the courage that burned within him despite the shadows of their past failure. His movements were precise, yet infused with a raw energy that spoke of a man determined to reclaim lost honor. Elijah moved through the tents with a quiet grace, tending to the wounded and preparing salves from the herbs she gathered in the nearby groves. Her touch was gentle but resolute, a balm not only for the body, but for the spirits weighed down by the coming war. She paused at Caelan's side to press a cool cloth against a fresh wound, her eyes meeting his in a moment of shared understanding. "The Brambleheart's bond grows stronger," she whispered, "but so does its curse. You must guard your soul as fiercely as your sword." The tension in the camp was shattered by the arrival of a rider, cloaked in dark leathers and bearing a message sealed with the blackened thorn emblem of Lord Marik Vane. The seal's ominous weight seemed to still the air as Lady Myron broke it open with trembling fingers. The message was clear and chilling. Marik's forces were advancing swiftly, their intent merciless. A heavy silence fell over the group before Caelan's voice cut through it, firm and unyielding. "We have little time. Gather the men. Tonight, we stand not just for ourselves, but for the soul of the kingdom." As the camp surged into motion, the fragile threads of trust and loyalty woven through Caelan's circle would be tested like never before. The path ahead was shadowed by uncertainty and the bitter cost of sacrifice. Yet within that darkness glimmered the faintest bloom of hope, a new dawn waiting to rise from the thorns. The night deepened, and with it, the resolve of those who would stand against the coming storm. Caelan's eyes lingered on the horizon, where the first glimmers of dawn began to chase away the shadows. The battle was not just for survival, but for the very future of the kingdom they all held dear. And as the whispered prayers of the thorn trees rustled through the air, a solemn oath echoed in Caelan's heart, one that would bind him to sacrifice, to hope, and to a destiny forged in the blooming thorns. The dawn would break soon, the kingdom's fate and Caelan's own soul hung precariously in the balance. Would their combined strength be enough to withstand the tide of corruption and war that Lord Marik's shadow had cast? The answer lay waiting in the days to come, in the clash of steel and spirit, and in the hearts of those bound by oath and thorn. The first light of dawn spilled over the horizon, casting a pale gold glow upon the jagged silhouettes of the thorn groves that ringed the besieged kingdom. From his vantage atop the battered ramparts, Sir Cael Thorn surveyed the sprawling enemy forces arrayed before him. A sea of armored knights and mercenaries stretched as far as the eye could see, their banners snapping sharply in the chill morning breeze. The scent of damp earth mingled with the acrid tang of smoke curling from distant fires, while the faint hum of restless thorn branches alive, watchful, whispered softly in the wind. Caelan's gaze settled on the enemy lines, his breath forming fleeting clouds in the cold air. His hands, calloused and steady, gripped the hilt of his sword, its edge gleaming even in the dim light. Around his forearms and shoulders, the dark, thorned branches of the brambleheart curled and writhed, their sharp tips blooming with tiny crimson flowers that pulsed faintly with life. This living armor was as much a part of him now as his own blood, a painful, unyielding bond that had transformed his very being. "They come like a storm," Sir Joran's voice rumbled beside him, the broad-shouldered knight's usual grin replaced by a grim set of determination. "But we stand like the old oaks, steady and unbroken," Caelan nodded, the weight of command settling heavily upon his shoulders. "The Brambleheart does not give its strength freely. We must be prepared to bleed for every inch." The clamour of the castle stirred behind them, armour clinking, orders shouted, the steady rhythm of bowstrings drawn taut. In the courtyard below, Elysia moved among the wounded, her slender frame a beacon of calm amid chaos. Her hands glowed with a soft, verdant light as she applied poultices and whispered prayers to the ancient spirits of the thorn trees. The mingled scents of crushed herbs, fresh earth, and sweat seemed to weave a fragile shield around the defenders. As the sun climbed higher, the enemy advanced. The earth trembled beneath the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel. Caelan's heart pounded in time with the war drums that echoed through the valley. The thorn trees responded, their branches creaking and twisting, thorns growing longer and sharper, blooming red as if fed by the blood about to be spilled. With a sharp cry, Sir Joran led a charge, his sword flashing like lightning as he cut through the first wave of attackers. His battle cry was fierce, a rallying call that steeled the nerves of the defenders. Around him, knights surged forward, their armor gleaming dully through the dust and smoke. The battle raged with a brutal intensity. Arrows hissed through the air, striking shields and flesh alike. The scent of blood and smoke thickened, mingling with the sweet, strange aroma of the blooming thorns. Caelan fought with a desperate grace, his movements fluid and precise. Each strike of his blade was accompanied by a pulse from the Brambleheart's thorns, a surge of raw power that lashed out at foes and healed minor wounds alike. Yet the cost was clear. The ground beneath the ramparts was churned to mud, littered with fallen knights and broken weapons. The defenders' faces, smeared with grime and sweat, were etched with exhaustion and resolve. Caelan caught sight of Lady Myron, her sharp eyes scanning the battlefield as she directed supplies and relayed critical information gleaned from spies within the enemy camp. Amid the chaos, a sudden cry rang out. Lord Marik Vane, clad in his ominous black armor adorned with wicked thorn motifs, strode into the fray. His cold eyes locked onto Caelan's, a twisted smile curling his lips. The two adversaries met at the heart of the battlefield, their swords clashing with a sound that rang like thunder. The Brambleheart's thorns around Caelan bloomed fiercely, glowing a deep crimson as if fueled by the fire of the duel. Magical energy crackled in the air, sparks flying from their blades as the fight escalated beyond mere steel. Each strike tested Caelan's endurance and spirit, the deadly curse within the Brambleheart threatening to consume him, even as it granted him strength. "You cannot win, Thorn," Lord Maric hissed, pressing his advantage with ruthless precision. "This kingdom will fall, and the Thorn binding will be mine to command." Caelan's reply was a grim smile, fierce and unyielding. "The Thorn may wound, but it also protects. And I am no mere knight, I am the Thorn that will bloom after the storm." Around them, the tide of battle shifted subtly. The defenders, inspired by their leader's defiance and the living thorns that seemed to fight alongside them, pressed back against the invaders. The blooming thorns formed barriers that slowed enemy advances and inflicted painful wounds on those who dared come too close. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the bloodied fields, the siege remained unbroken. Though exhausted and battered, the defenders held their ground. Lord Maric, forced to reconsider his strategy, withdrew his forces with a cold glare, vowing the war was far from over. In the aftermath, Caelan stood amid the ruin, the Brambleheart's thorns still blooming red against the darkening sky. His body etched with wounds both seen and unseen, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The kingdom had endured the storm of thorns, united by sacrifice and the unyielding hope that even in pain, there could be new growth. "We have held the line," Alicia said softly as she approached, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of the thorns. "But the war has only just begun." Caelan nodded, his gaze hardening. "Then we will stand ready, as long as the thorn blooms." The night settled over the kingdom, the thorn trees whispering their ancient secrets. Though the battle was won, the true test of Caelan's oath, and the fate of the realm still lay ahead, entwined in the painful beauty of blooming thorns. The sky was a roiling cauldron of iron-gray clouds, a low thunder rumbling as though the heavens themselves held their breath. Below, the battlefield sprawled like a dark wound across the earth, torn by the clamor of clashing steel and cries of the fallen. Sir Cael Thorn stood at the center of it all, his figure lean but unyielding. The faint crimson light of the Brambleheart's blooming thorns pulsing beneath his weathered armor. Every breath he drew was sharp and ragged, the air thick with the scent of blood mingled with the wild tang of crushed thorn bushes. He could feel the living tree's heartbeat entwined with his own, a relentless pulse that both empowered and threatened to consume him. Across the field, Lord Maric Vane waited, a shadow carved in blackened steel and cold ambition. His armor, adorned with wicked thorns black as night, shimmered with an unnatural sheen beneath the storm-darkened sky. Maric's eyes, sharp and merciless, locked onto Caelan with an intensity that chilled the very marrow of any who dared meet his gaze. Around them, the clash of battle faltered, the warriors sensing the impending storm between the two thorn-bound adversaries. Without a word, Maric advanced, his blade singing through the air a dark arc of malice and power. Caelan met the strike with a practiced parry, the clash ringing out like a bell tolling doom. The Brambleheart's curse surged through Caelan's veins then, a fierce wildfire of pain and power. His muscles tensed, betraying the agony beneath, but his spirit remained unbroken. The thorns on his arms bloomed, crimson petals unfolding with a light both beautiful and terrible, searing yet sustaining. Visions flickered behind Caelan's eyes, faces of fallen comrades, whispers of oaths made and broken, the cold betrayal that had cast him into exile. Each memory stoked the fire within, sharpening his resolve. He would not falter, not now. Maric's strikes came faster, brutal and precise, but Caelan moved with a grace born of desperation and honor. Each block and counter a testament to his skill and unyielding will. The air around them hummed with the mingled energies of the living thorn tree and the dark ambition that sought to choke the kingdom's soul. The ground beneath their feet was torn and scattered with the remnants of their clash, petals and blood mingling in a grim mosaic. Nearby, the shouts of Sir Joran rang out, a fierce rallying cry as he and Alicia held back the tide of Maric's loyalists. Joran's broad shoulders bore the scars of many battles, his face set in grim determination as he parried and struck with unwavering loyalty. Alicia moved with quiet urgency, her emerald eyes scanning for the wounded, her hands steady despite the chaos. Lady Myron's presence was felt in every whispered command and swift action, a beacon of calm amid the storm. Back in the center, Caelan felt the Brambleheart's curse intensify, its deadly grip tightening like the very thorns that bound him. The pain was excruciating, a searing blaze beneath his skin, yet within it lay an unspoken promise, a chance for redemption, for rebirth. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his eyes burned with a solemn fire. With a surge of strength, Caelan stepped forward, the blooming thorns along his arms flaring into a fierce blaze of crimson and shadow. He met Marik's next strike with a thunderous clash, twisting and driving the corrupt noble backward. Each movement was a dance of life and death, the edge of Caelan's blade singing a song of sacrifice and honor. In a final, shattering moment, Caelan's blade found its mark, shattering Marik's sword and forcing the noble to his knees upon the blood-soaked earth. Silence fell over the battlefield like a heavy shroud, broken only by the ragged breaths of the living and the faint rustle of thorn petals carried on the wind. Caelan fell to one knee, the Brambleheart's bloom glowing fiercely across his skin, a testament to the oath he had fulfilled at the peril of his very soul. The cost had been immense, the path wrought with pain and loss, but his honor had been reclaimed. Around him, the kingdom held its breath, watching as the thorn-bound knight stood at the precipice of life and death, a symbol of sacrifice and the fragile hope of renewal. As thunder rolled across the heavens, the question lingered in the heavy air: could Caelan survive the deadly bond long enough to lead the kingdom into a new dawn? Or would the thorns claim him forever? The answer lay in the quiet bloom of the thorn tree, and in the heart of the man who had sworn to endure and to sacrifice for the realm he loved. The air hung thick with smoke and the acrid tang of blood as the final clash erupted beneath a sky bruised by storm clouds. Thorn petals, delicate yet stained a deep crimson, drifted silently through the chaos, a haunting snowfall that whispered of sacrifice and sorrow. At the center of this maelstrom stood Sir Caelan Thorn, his tall frame braced, muscles taut, and eyes burning with solemn fire. The Brambleheart's dark branches spiraled around him, their twisted limbs pulsing faintly with blooming thorns that pierced the flesh of his arms and chest. Each bloom a searing reminder of the deadly bond he had chosen to bear. Across the field, the chilling figure of Lord Marik Vane emerged from the smoke like a shadow made flesh. His blackened armor, adorned with wicked thorns that seemed to writhe in the dim light, caught the flicker of torches and dying fires. His eyes, cold and merciless, locked onto Caelan with a sneer that spoke of arrogant certainty. Around them, the clash of steel and cries of battle faded into a tense silence, as if the world itself held its breath for the inevitable confrontation. Caelan's grip tightened on his sword, the leather worn from years of wielding, now slick with his own blood and the sap of the Brambleheart. Each breath was a struggle, the curse gnawing at his very spirit, threatening to consume him whole, yet within the torment, a fierce clarity burned. This was the moment he had sworn to face, the culmination of every oath, every thorn that had blossomed in pain. With a roar that shook the heavens, Marik charged, the sound of his armor clinking like a death knell. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the clash echoing across the battlefield. Marik's strikes were precise, cold and ruthless, each blow intended to break Caelan's will. But Caelan, driven by a desperate hope and the weight of his past failures, met each attack with a resilience born of sacrifice. He parried and countered, his movements fluid despite the burning agony coursing through his veins. Around them, the battle raged on a tempest of steel and fury. Sir Joran fought fiercely beside Elysia, their calls rallying the scattered defenders. Elysia's hands glowed with the faint light of healing herbs, tending to wounded knights even as arrows darkened the sky. Lady Myron, poised and unyielding, coordinated the defense from the castle walls, her voice a steady beacon amid the din. Their courage was a lifeline, a testament to the bonds forged in blood and trust. Back at the heart of the conflict, Caelan felt the Brambleheart's curse tighten its grip. The blooming thorns along his arms and chest flared painfully, petals unfurling like burning stars. He staggered but forced himself upright, eyes fixed on Marek, who hesitated, sensing the surge of power emanating from his foe. With a guttural cry, Caelan unleashed a final, desperate strike, piercing through Marek's defenses and driving the corrupt noble back. But the victory came at a grave cost. The curse pulsed violently within Caelan, threatening to tear his soul apart. He sank to one knee, breath ragged, as the thorn blooms spread rapidly, pain and power intertwined in a bittersweet symphony. Around him, the battlefield seemed to still, the blooming thorns casting an eerie glow that spread like a healing balm over the weary soldiers. As Caelan's vision blurred, he saw the faces of those he had lost and those who still fought for the kingdom's future. A fragile hope blossomed within him, a promise that his sacrifice would not be in vain. The Brambleheart's bloom was both an end and a beginning, a painful transformation that heralded the dawn of a new era. The battle waned, Lord Marek's forces scattered, and the kingdom's people began to reckon with the cost and meaning of honor, sacrifice, and renewal. Though Caelan's fate hung in the balance, his spirit endured, etched forever in the blooming thorns that marked his painful, hopeful rebirth. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the blood-soaked ground, a whisper of uncertainty lingered in the air. Would the kingdom embrace the change his sacrifice demanded? Or would the thorns of corruption once again choke the fragile bloom of hope? The answer lay beyond the dawn, waiting to be revealed. The great hall was unusually crowded, the air heavy with the mingled scents of smoke from the torches and the faint, lingering aroma of crushed thorn petals. Lady Myron stood at the center, poised and resolute, her deep green robes embroidered with silver thorns catching the flickering light. Around her, the nobles of the realm whispered in hushed tones, their faces etched with fatigue and uncertainty. It had been weeks since the siege, and the wounds, both physical and political, were raw. "My lords and ladies," Myron began, her voice steady despite the tension that hummed in the air, "we can no longer ignore the shadows that have long haunted our kingdom. The corruption festering within the thorn-binding tradition, the betrayal that nearly shattered us all, it must end." She gestured to the table where scrolls and documents lay spread. There, evidence of Lord Marek Vani's manipulations and schemes was laid bare. The room fell silent as the weight of the truth settled over the assembly. Some shifted uncomfortably, others exchanged glances laden with disbelief or reluctant acceptance. In the back of the hall, Caelan stood apart, his tall, lean frame silhouetted against the stone pillars. The scar that ran down his left cheek was softened by the radiant bloom of thorns that had taken root along his arms and shoulders, an emblem of his oath renewed and his sacrifice endured. His brooding eyes scanned the crowd, catching glimpses of familiar faces, some wary, some hopeful. As Lady Myron spoke, Caelan's thoughts drifted back to the moment beneath the ancient thorn tree in the palace courtyard. The twilight had settled, and with each breath, he had felt the intertwining of his spirit with the living thorn. The blooming thorns on his skin glowed faintly, delicate and deadly, a testament to the price he had paid and the power he now carried. Villagers had gathered quietly, their faces illuminated by the soft glow, watching him with a mixture of reverence and awe. The scent of crushed leaves and the crisp evening air filled the space, the soft rustle of branches overhead accompanying the unspoken promise of renewal. The thorn trees, long symbols of pain and sacrifice, were now a beacon of hope. In the days following the council meeting, Alicia wandered the sacred groves, her slender fingers tracing the sharp edges of the thorny branches. The sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, dappling the forest floor with golden light. She whispered prayers for protection and healing, her voice a soothing balm in the fragile peace that had settled over the land. Her emerald eyes reflected a fierce determination. The groves were no longer just a place of ancient lore. They were a sanctuary against the darkness that had nearly consumed them. Word of her efforts spread quietly through the villages and towns, inspiring others to join in the protection of the sacred trees and the traditions they embodied. Meanwhile, in a secluded chamber within the castle, Caelan met with Lady Myron and Elysia. Their voices were low but resolute as they discussed the fragile political landscape and the work that lay ahead. The distant hum of the city's life echoed beyond the stone walls, a reminder of the world waiting to be healed. "The people are ready for change," Myron said, her eyes steady. "But the old wounds run deep. We must be patient yet unwavering." Elysia nodded, "And we must remind them that the true strength of the Thorn binding is not in power, but in sacrifice and honor. Caelan's bond is living proof." Caelan looked down at his arms, the thorns blooming in delicate patterns like scars that told a story of endurance and hope. "I will carry this oath forward," he said quietly. "For the kingdom, for those we lost, and for those yet to come." The chapter closed with the three figures silhouetted against the waning light, their resolve a solemn yet powerful symbol of a new beginning. The kingdom, battered but unbroken, stood on the cusp of transformation. The thorn-bound knight, once disgraced and exiled, had become a living emblem of sacrifice and redemption, his blooming thorns a promise that even in the darkest of times, hope could take root and flourish. And as the first stars appeared above the castle, the kingdom began to reckon with its past and look toward a future where honor was reclaimed, corruption uprooted, and the sacred bond between nature and spirit honored anew. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in many moons, it was a path illuminated by the gentle, persistent bloom of thorns. The dawn crept softly over the horizon, spilling pale gold and rose across the waking kingdom. Sir Cael Thorn stood atop the hill that overlooked the land he had sworn to protect, a kingdom bruised but breathing, fragile yet alive. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth freshly turned and wildflowers newly bloomed. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the thorn trees behind him, their branches swaying as if in quiet benediction. Caelan raised his arm, watching the delicate thorns bloom along his skin, their faint glow pulsing like embers beneath the surface. The transformation was no longer a curse, but a symbol, a testament to sacrifice, resilience, and renewal. His scar, once a mark of shame, now intertwined with the living thorns, whispered stories of pain endured and hope reclaimed. Each breath he drew was a reminder of the journey he had endured, the relentless battles, the betrayals that had nearly broken him, and the oath he had sworn beneath the shadowed boughs of the bramble heart. Now, as the kingdom stirred below, those thorns bloomed with a new meaning, a promise that even the deepest wounds could give rise to something beautiful and strong. Behind him, the ancient grove rustled softly, and a familiar figure approached. Elysia's slender form moved with grace, her auburn hair catching the dawn light. Her emerald eyes held a serene hope that mirrored his own. She knelt beside him, her hands gentle as they traced the blooming thorns, her touch suffused with healing warmth. "The bond is strong," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm after the storm of their trials. "You carry the kingdom's pain and its promise all at once." Caelan met her gaze, the depths of his gratitude unspoken but understood. "It is no longer just my burden," he said quietly. "It is the kingdom's, and I will bear it with honor." Their moment was interrupted by the steady footsteps of Sir Joran, who approached with the broad-shouldered confidence that had anchored Caelan through countless storms. His usual grin was tempered with the weight of recent losses, but it held a steady warmth. "You wear those thorns well," Joran said, clapping a firm hand on Caelan's shoulder. "They suit the man who refuses to break." A flicker of a smile softened Caelan's features. "I've learned that strength comes not from never falling, but from rising each time, no matter the pain." Together, they turned their gaze towards the distant spires of the castle, where the wheels of politics and power now began to turn anew. Lady Myron awaited within, her presence a quiet but steadfast reminder of alliances forged in hope rather than ambition. Her eyes, once shadowed with caution, now held a spark of cautious optimism. Within the great hall, the air was thick with the mingled scents of candle wax and aged tapestries. Elysia moved with purpose, tending to the lingering blooms on Caelan's arms, her hands weaving ancient herbs and whispered prayers into a delicate dance of healing and protection. Around them, murmurs rose from the nobles gathered, some still wary, others visibly moved by the transformation they witnessed. "The kingdom will never be the same," Lady Myron whispered beside Caelan, her voice low yet resolute. "And perhaps for the first time in generations, that change will be for the better." The evening brought them beneath the ancient boughs of the Brambleheart itself. The great tree stood tall and proud, its twisted branches heavy with blossoms that glowed faintly in the fading light. The old Thorn keeper awaited, his stooped figure cloaked in the rough, spun robes of the guardianship he had held for decades. He spoke in a voice as old as the roots beneath their feet, recounting the prophecy long whispered among the keepers of Thorn lore. From the deepest sacrifice, the new bloom arises. It is not the absence of pain, but the choice to endure it that marks the true night. Caelan stepped forward, placing a hand upon the gnarled bark. The thorns seemed to pulse in response, a living heartbeat that echoed his own. Around him, the gathered crowd held their breath, witnessing a moment heavy with ancient magic and new beginnings. As night fully claimed the sky, stars twinkled like distant promises overhead. The kingdom was poised on the cusp of change, its fate tied irrevocably to the thorn-bound knight who had walked through darkness and emerged, not unscathed, but reborn. Caelan looked up, a solemn smile touching his lips. "This is only the beginning," he whispered to the night, a vow carried on the wind to every corner of the realm. "The new bloom will grow stronger, brighter, and free." And somewhere deep within the thorn groves, the Brambleheart seemed to pulse in quiet agreement, its blossoms glowing with the light of a future forged in sacrifice and hope. The kingdom stirred, alive with possibility, and so did Sir Caelan Thorn, thorn-bound and unbroken, stepping forward to meet the dawn of a new era.